Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, this is we're in August, so you know what August is. This is time to start getting honey out of the hive and making your inspections. Get in there and do your check your mites, do your mite checks. Now, a lot of people, they might not do the mite checks, you know, like what we do. There's basically two good ways to do it. Get you a pint jar and brush you off about 300 bees, or at least a third of a jar of bees. And close the lid up and don't put alcohol in it till you roll that jar a few times and make sure that the queen's not there. Now, if you don't want to use alcohol and kill bees, you know, some people don't want to kill them at all. You can take about the same amount of bees and take a canning lid and poke a bunch of holes in it, put you about 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar in there and just kind of roll them around and then dump it out onto a white piece of poster paper. That's another good way to check them. And after you're checking them, if you find out, you know, you got mites or you got a bad queen, now's the time to start getting your orders in for next year. And we got a man here tonight. I hope he'll talk to about his AI queens. And some people want to buy AI queens, some people don't. But if you're going to sell bees, it's a good idea to have some good lines in there, lines that you can work just about any kind of weather. And if you're going to treat your bees, I would suggest between now and December a minimum of 6 treatments. And I prefer using oxalic acid and within a vaporizer. And personally, September, October, and November, I'm going to do at least 3 treatments each month minimum, because I'm going to go into December with no mites. And if you're trying to do some splits this time of the year, I wouldn't recommend trying to do walk-away splits. I'd recommend, if you're got a good strong hive, buy a queen. It's a good investment, and you'll have better luck with it. Now, I can't see if Jason is coming. Is Jason coming? I thought I seen him come in and out.
He's been in a couple times, and
okay, he might be having some trouble there. But make right now a good time to start making boxes, getting ready for next year if you're going to sell bees and nukes and stuff. And be sure that you get your web page up. Find you somebody that can do your web page and start getting your web page up. Go to several different bee clubs and get your name out there and socialize a little bit. Let people know you're going to raise local queens and have nukes and stuff ready. So until Jason gets in, if anybody's got any questions, let's get those questions. Everyone will jump their hand up at one time.
Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I got bad weather here too. I hope, Don, you can hear me all right. My internet connection is pretty lousy. But I made 3 splits 2 weeks ago with mated queens, and they all took off fine. The only thing is she's not laying a very big patch of brood. But right now I didn't see much pollen coming in, so I want to put few cubes of pollen patties in there. Hopefully that'll get her going.
Well, if you're going to add pollen inside of a hive, you're going to have to use, if you've got patties, like Man Lake sells patties. A lot of people sell patties. Take those patties and bust them up at least eight times. You want the bees to consume them quick. Now you can take a 2-gallon bucket, cut you like a mailbox, a 3-inch slot, 5 inches wide, turn it sideways, put a cup of pollen in there, dry pollen substitute, and just turn it sideways. And that way you run a lot less risk of getting beetles in there. All right, we see Jason in here. Jason, you wanting to talk about AI queens a little bit tonight? Or are we having bad connections?
Connection issues. I think I'm on my phone now. I think I got it working.
Yeah,
Okay,
we can hear you now.
We're doing good. Talk about your AI queens and what we're going to do with them.
Well, basically, I'm running a lot of different strains. Diversity, I think diversity is a big key in breeding, and I don't know if you guys have read up a lot on it, but if you look back and read up on the papers from when the varroa mites hit, supposedly there's a lot of documents that state that we lost like 90% of our bees in the United States when the varroa mites first hit. And when you think about that, the borders were already closed by then for import of bees. So I believe a lot of the bees that we have right now in the U.S. are probably being affected by being bred from that 10%. So everything we have has been bred out of the 10% that was left after the varroa wiped them out. So my biggest goal is to get a lot of diversity back in, queens that produce well, that handle mites and disease well, and overwinter well in all regions.
Now, I always suggest people when they're first starting out, I know a lot of people here are not selling a lot of bees. Production queens will do really good. If you're going to start selling a lot of bees and you want to try to keep good lines, then buy some AI queens. That way you kind of know what you're running. But all the videos and stuff I've been out and I've done, I keep talking about, if you got bees, you need to keep improving stock. That's why I buy stock from different people trying to improve constantly. If you keep inbreeding your own stock, you're going to have problems. So that's why I invited Jason here tonight to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, what happens whenever you do if you get a lot of inbreeding going on, you'll notice a loss in brood viability, more and more shotgun pattern, because you have a diploid. If that egg is too inbred when that queen raises it, if she's using genes from both sides that are similar, from the male and the female, from the queen, they'll remove that egg. And that's where you get that massive shotgun pattern, which is basically their way of trying to control inbreeding. They're trying to get rid of the bees that would be inbred, the eggs. But another thing you got to look at too is a lot of this new VSH stock will have a little bit of a shotgun pattern also, where they remove varroa mites.
Yeah, they're cleaning it out. And then
Right.
that first thing people think is the queen is failing.
Right. Yep, sure enough.
If you're going to order queens and stuff, get with Jason, because I'm imagining right now he's probably starting to fill orders out for next year. So if at all possible, try to get a little bit of diversity in your line, try different lines. And I've got some of Jason's, and I'm going to, in fact, I put one of the queens in last Wednesday. She was out Saturday. I haven't had time to go through and see if she's laying yet. I basically installed the queen, and when I seen the cage was empty, I just reached in and pulled the cage out. Okay, so I seen her walking on the frame, so I didn't end up going there. And that's the same principle I teach when you put new queens in. Just remove the cage. If you're a new beekeeper and you get in there and you pull that cage, the first thing you want to do is start rooting through there and you damage a queen before you spot her. So that is my take on it. So anybody have questions about queens, Jason's here. He can answer your questions and give you a little insight on it. He's a little more knowledgeable about breeding than I am. I've basically learned a lot of my stuff by mistakes.
I've learned a lot of mine by mistakes too. One thing, one question that I get a lot of is, what's the difference between a breeder queen and a regular open-mated queen? And typically, it depends on who you ask. Some people judge their queens. Not everybody uses the same standard when judging their queens. Typically, a breeder queen is something of known lineage that is mated in an area where either it's an isolated area where they know that the only drones that they can mate with are, drones from a certain line, or they flood the area with drones of certain lines. Like a lot of people will that do a lot of mating and try to mate for very specific lines will put drone colonies out in a triangular pattern around their mating yard about half a mile or 3/4 of a mile out, so that they're getting a lot better chance of those queens mating with the drones that they want them to mate with. Well, with an artificially inseminated queen, you're guaranteed what drone line she's mated with because you've got the drones right from that hive. But the big thing with the artificially inseminated queens is you can control the genetics. I have a database that I keep of lineage. I know every queen that I make is numbered, and I know who their parents were, what drones they're crossed with, what traits they're producing, and if I want to try to improve on one trait or another in a line, I go to one of my other lines and pick drones from that line and cross back to this line if I want to improve overwintering or honey production, something like that. It gives you a much more controlled way of trying to get the traits in that line of stock that you want. So that's the big thing with breeder queens, whereas open mated queens, they just go fly out and mate with whatever's in the area, and you don't really know what drones they cross with. There could be a guy down the road a mile that has a bunch of Russian hives, and all of a sudden your whole yard might turn mean because they've crossed with Russian drones.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, but when people are starting out, the initial investment is high. When you're going to start selling bees, you're looking at 50, 100 hives. That's why I kind of suggest buy production queens. They're open mated queens. Usually you got a good stock. Buy from known breeders. Just because you're buying some queens that are Joe or somebody, I'm not naming Joe, but let's say the guy down the road, anybody who's producing queens, he's inbreeding, he don't want to spend money on his stock, you don't know what you're getting. So buy from, a guy that's been in business, someone who's got stock, and if you're not totally sure what you're getting, set an out yard up and run them things for a while and work them, see what they're going to do. I mean, what I do is I sell breeder queens here, and I consider a breeder queen is an open mated queen, and it's got a 1/2 inch of honey across the top bar, and it's wall to wall, totally good laying pattern. So I would consider that breeding stock, but I don't charge as much as, a certified breeder queen. I'm basically open mating all mine, and we graft. A lot of people want to buy virgin queens. If you don't have good stock in your yard to start with, it's not a good suggestion because you don't know what that queen's going to mate with. And a lot of people are under the assumed thing of bees mate in the box. A queen has to fly out. I've had, I don't know, in so many years, probably a dozen people over the years thought queens mated in the box. It doesn't happen. They have to fly out. And every year, you're going to have different problems. Some years you might not get, a year and a half ago, we had less than 30% of our actual hatched virgin queens return because of predators and air. So if you need 50 queens and you're open mating virgins, buy extras because you don't know what you're going to get. Now, Jason probably can explain a lot more on those lines too, where I'm doing a lot of trial and error here. I'm trying to get more scientific like Jason's doing up there.
Well, right now, back in the spring, I was having really good luck with my open mated queens returning. But right now, since we've gone into the dearth, I've dropped to lower than 50% return on open mated queens. They're not doing real well, and it'll get worse as we get closer to winter. See, my bees are starting to kick out drones right now. Our winter comes a lot sooner than yours does.
Right. Yeah. Now, another thing you might want to think about, if you want to try to open mate your bees, we are running 1 frame and sometimes 2 frames of green comb on the outside of our 8-frame hives. Now, in our yards where we're going to do a lot of grafting, we'll set 100 grafts out in mating boxes. We run 4 frames in an 8-frame box, 2 on each side of drone comb, which is the green comb. so that we try to basically flood the area, and you still don't have the guarantees. So it might be a good idea if you want to stay in business, buy a couple queens that are AI queens to at least have a good base to work from. And if you're going to be a honey producer, you want to get a queen that's more suitable for that. If you want to be pollinating or, raising queens, try to, I'm sure you can call Jason up and tell him what you're trying to do, and he'll probably steer you down the right road.
Yeah.
I have tried Russians. I cannot deal with them because they're too aggressive. And when you get young people here or new beekeepers, they attack. And my problem I've had is when you pull a frame up, they're off the frame. They're very flighty. The Carniolan and your we use some Caucasian Carniolas and Italian hybrids. Russian and your Carniolan are geared more for pollen. When the pollen starts to drop off, the queen starts to slow down. Where as long as you're feeding sugar syrup, Italians go full blast. Now, those are some of the lines that I've learned. Now, maybe Jason can highlight a little bit more on the characteristics of each race. And then, as far as selling bees, I would stick with 1 or 2 races. Don't try to cover every race because you're not going to keep up with them.
Yeah, and Don, you touched on a good subject there too when you mentioned hybrids.
Mhm.
Another thing you got to look for is with who's making your breeder queens. If some of the universities do a lot of this, they'll make breeder queens with intentions of those breeder queens, the daughters, open mating with whatever stock's in your area to produce a hybrid. Well, when they make breeder queens that way, they inbreed them or line breed them to a certain extent until their brood viability drops down close to 60%. That way, when the daughters from that queen open mate, you get that hybrid vigor in all those daughters. So basically, those queens, you might install them, and they might look like they're doing a terrible job in the hive because they're inbred to the point that they'll produce hybrids from their daughters. And the daughters will do great. So that's another thing you need to be aware of if you're buying a breeder queen, to make sure, is she bred diversified with stock that's not related to her? If she is, then she's going to produce a real good brood pattern. Is she bred to produce hybrids? And if she's bred for that, then her brood pattern's not going to be so hot. And mostly, a breeder queen, if you buy a breeder queen, your intent is going to be to produce bunches of daughters out of her. So it's the daughters and how well they do that you really want to be interested in. But speaking on the races, there's a bunch of different races. And over the years, I think it was 1922 when our borders was closed to importing of new bees. And then at a couple different times throughout the past 100 years, the borders have been opened, like to Canada, to Australia for a while, to New Zealand. You could import some bees from New Zealand. I think it's pretty much all closed except but for Canada right now. But you've got your buckfast bees, which most of those are very good. If you get the ones that are coming out of the north, out of Canada, if you get the ones that are coming out of the south, you might want to be careful because depending on where they come from, they could be crossed with Africanized drones. So the farther, like in the low stuff, there's a lot of buckfast come out of that area that have a reputation for being a little bit mean. Well, it's because of the drones they're crossed with. But they're also, if you get pure strains of them, they're very good honey producers. Their disease resistance is really good. They're very calm to work with. They overwinter well in colder areas. They don't have a high percentage of mite resistance, but most people are treating anyways. So if you're going to treat, then the mite resistance really isn't that big of a deal. The Carniolans I really like because they're really calm. They overwinter well. Usually a darker colored bee, I've found, especially where it gets colder up in the mountains here, a darker colored bee will overwinter better than a lighter colored bee. But a lighter colored bee, like you said there a minute ago with the Italians, if you're feeding them, they're going to lay year round. And if it gets warm for a week in January, she'll start laying, and then another cold spell comes and they won't leave that brood, and some of them will freeze on that brood and you'll lose bee numbers. I'm really liking the Caucasians right now. I have 3 different lines of Caucasians that come out of 3 different breeders that Sue Colby has produced from the stock she brought back, germplasm or drone semen from the Republic of Georgia, out of pure Caucasian stock. And man, they are super quiet. In fact, your queen has some of that in her. She has
Are
some
those gray looking ones?
Yeah, they're mountain gray Caucasians.
Right.
You pull up the frame. I've got an observation hive here in the house, and I open it up in the house and rarely have a bee fly out. Rarely. You pull up a frame and they just freeze on the frames. They're some of the calmest bees I've ever seen. They come from a cold region, so they're going to. I like Italians for building brood. You can split and split and split all summer long, and you can make a lot of nukes out of Italians. What else? I've never had Russians. I actually, if you remember, when I first started breeding, I talked to you about Russians, and you said, I don't think you want to get Russians. Well, I took that to heart. I have never gotten a Russian, and since then, I've actually been around some, and I'm glad I didn't get any. So, there's a lot of different strains out there, and then you get into, those are races, but you also get into strains that people have bred too.
Right.
Like you get into the Purdue mite biters, which are known, they're right now running about 50% on leg biting of mites, and a mite doesn't clot. Their blood can't clot. So if a leg gets bit off, that mite dies. So they're running about 50% mite resistance. You get into the Martha Carpenter mite maulers, which are being tested, and he won't even, of course, he's 80-some years old now, so it's even hard to get a breeder queen from him anymore. He's about quit. But they're testing at 75% mite resistance, and they actually chew the body of the mite. They have really strong mandibles. They'll chew up the wood in a hive, and they're still a gentle bee to handle. Then you've had the VSH stock, like the USDA is running, which a lot of people get confused about that too when they talk Varroa sensitive hygienics. The freeze-dried test, where they freeze a patch of brood and see how many they can remove in 24 hours, that tells you hygienicness, but it doesn't tell you their Varroa sensitive hygienicness. There's other tests. Yeah, right. There's other tests that you have to run for that. So it's all very detailed when you get into the depth of it.
Well, the nice thing about the chats that we have, they're on YouTube and they're being seen over and over. That's why I invited you to give your perspective on getting started. A lot of people want to start selling bees, but they just can't get over the edge. I don't know, can't make that mind up. They don't think they can sell bees. And I try to tell people, if you produce good stock, you never have to advertise. One person brings more and more. You'll stay busy. So I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I have never advertised. I'll do some stuff on Facebook and I'll answer questions. I've never advertised, and I probably never will, because I can't fill the orders that I'm getting now. I had a commercial producer call me last week and asked me for 6,000 queens this fall. And our season's ending. I can't produce I probably couldn't produce 6,000 queens right now in the spring. I'm just not that big.
It takes quite a few years. I've been doing this a long time, and I have never had all my boxes full all winter. Right now, I started out in the spring, and I filled almost 100% of my boxes. I probably have 40, maybe 55% of my boxes at this yard. Now, the only thing that's saving me is Steven. He's hiding the hives in different locations, and I stay busy here. So the hives that we have on out locations are doing fine. That's what we're going to have to do our splits and shaking from. But here, there's a there's a thing that's just hard to learn to say is no when people call you. You've done business with in the past, and they have a sad story. They lost their queen and need a queen. And so you're out there pulling queens out of your producing hives that people stand. You're out, but it's hard to tell people, no, you don't have them.
Yeah, it's I've yet to be able to keep up with all the orders that I get. I took a lot of pre-orders back in the winter, and I did get all those filled well. But as far as any extras, I've not been able to really get enough out there. There's just a constant demand for it, and like you say, you never have enough equipment either.
Right. Yeah, when I start students out here, the first thing is they want to jump in and start learning grafting and everything. And I try to explain to them, learn the basics, cut cells out, and by cutting cells, you will never be able to build enough boxes just cutting cells. So if you're going to start grafting, you need to turn out a couple hundred queens a week. So that means a constant supply of boxes, and you just never get caught up. And the phone is your worst enemy when you're doing bees because it never stops ringing.
Yeah, I'll agree with that 100%. At one point, I actually removed my phone number from my website and asked that people just email me because it's easier for me to keep up with it that way.
Right. Yeah. Is it no one got no questions tonight? I'm sure we got questions.
I had a couple with their hands up earlier, but they've
Okay.
since put them down. We can start with Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis.
Talking to me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
All right. I've got a few questions. First of all, it would be nice if Jason give me his phone number for future reference. We'll let you do that on your own. Also, what do you think about the cloak board as far as using it for a starter and finish your hive with cells? You ever use that?
Me or Jason?
Yes. No, you don't.
I don't use it personally.
I was looking at it and I can see some good qualities both ways. I'm just curious what you thought about it. And I also like to thank all you guys that gave me the advice on the hive beetles. I haven't lost a hive this year. I lost about 70 last year, the first time we had the beetles come through. Them discs with the proper stuff in them really helps out. Also, I just had 60 pounds of honey get contaminated. Would you recommend me holding off to spring to feed it back to the bees?
Contaminated how? How did it get contaminated and what?
Well, I have a laundry tray. I put my cappings in. When I scratch off the cappings and a bucket underneath, I poured out about 40 pounds to another 20-pound bucket, and a mouse come floating out of it. So it ruined the whole bucket full of honey.
Is that your contaminated?
Yep.
As long as you're not going to eat it, I would have set it out. But, do it in small amounts.
I didn't know if I ought to put that on in late spring, early spring, where they might take it faster than sugar, or just go on and put it out now.
If you use it on your buildup in the springtime, it's all right. Most people don't realize, it's hard to contaminate honey. A mouse is going to float. It won't sink. Now, a lot of times when people mention things, it jars my memory. And, a lot of people can't, or they might have some rodent problems around their honey house, and maybe people haven't thought about it. But if you take a pie pan, aluminum pie pan, put some Coca-Cola in it, and set it in your honey house, and if a mouse eats it, it'll kill them without the poison. Yeah. Same thing with roaches.
Well, this one caught me off guard. It had been there it didn't smell. The honey encapsulates it, keeps it from spoiling, but I wouldn't feed it to nobody. All right. You've talked me into going down to single hive bodies. Would you recommend keeping that next spring, just keep them overloaded, build up from them?
It depends on what your ambition is. If you're wanting to make bees,
yes.
Bees are going to do the two things. They multiply and store honey. So when they get crowded, they're going to make cells. Also, your 5-frame boxes, they just build up so much faster. If you want to get a good quick start, you might talk to Jason, get some virgin queens if you got good stock. If not, buy regular production queens. Yeah. If your stock's good, it's workable, and you're happy with it, you know, production-wise, gentleness, and overwintering, then use your own stock.
I've got some good stock. 2 different lines. I got 2 different yards. One of the lines you wouldn't want to have. I have inbred for 18 years out of them, and just started in. They're Buckfast out of Texas. He knows what he's talking about. The second go around, they can get kind of rough.
Oh yeah.
I believe they'll run the African bees back home. That's how bad they are. But I'm going to bring in a Buckfast from Canada this spring, and maybe some of the drones, see if I can settle them down. But I keep them separate. The rest of the lines is kind of a mix of some Italian, Caucasian, and some New Order Canoians and stuff. And they're pretty gentle and pretty good. But I just want to increase as quick as possible. I like to be up and running in 2 years or less.
What are you wanting to do? Sell nukes? Are you trying to go for the honey, or are you going for the pollination?
I'm going for queens, nukes, and packages.
Well, then what I would do is Jason's got a web page up. It's New River Bees. You can send him an email. Just have a little chat with him and tell him your intentions, and he's going to, you know, custom fit you. Okay. I've done a lot of trial and error. So there's some people out there that are selling bees and have been selling bees for years. And even if they were selling them half price, I don't want them because they're just ill to work with. And if you're going to produce honey, even pollinating on some jobs, they want more gentle bees. But some people have the idea that a mean bee makes more honey, which is untrue. So,
well, my mean ones are left on an isolated quarry.
Yeah.
And I'll add some stock to it. These tame ones I work without a veil. Very seldom ever get, well, my belly gets stung more than anything leaning over the box. They don't really come out and do me any harm. But I think that's it. All right. If I think anything else, I'll get back.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Ricky. Go ahead.
Yeah, g'day everyone. Just a bit of feedback. It's been great info tonight, really enjoyable. It's probably why we haven't got many hands up, because everyone's just too busy absorbing the new info. Feedback for Joe May. I'm really enjoying your intermediate and your basic series. So, and your bonus videos are even better, great, because look forward every week for them. So sort of hanging out to find out if we're splitting or anything like that. So it's really appreciate it. I'm learning a lot from it. Now
save your money too.
Oh yeah. I'm building mate nukes, so interesting to see see what happens. Now, if you're going to make 200 queens a week, you must have to have 1,000 mating nukes. That must be pretty intensive work.
Well, now if you're going to get into the mating nukes, now you have to figure out how much time you can work those nukes. The most economical way is a mini nuke. You know, your next bet would be go to your 5-frame. And that way, if you don't get to pull the queen or it doesn't overpopulate. The mini nukes are good because you use a couple of bees and a queen cell, a ripe queen cell. Where your 5-frame box, if you don't have time, you got a job, you can let them run a week to 2 weeks, you know, and then basically take a 5-frame box, put 4 more cells, make 4 splits out of that. It buys you a little more time. So each thing has got its own little good and bad about.
Yeah, I'm just making up 2-frame boxes, so that's what I've been called. That's what I call it. So that way, because I've got a job, I need a bit of can't always be in them every day. So to start doing what Joe's doing, making 1-frame splits, because it's spring in a couple of weeks here. Yeah. And see how they go. The other thing is, how do people go about getting outyards, and do they just pay, like give people honey, or is there usually how much do you guys pay?
Well, a good outyard, if it's a honey producing yard, basically I've never given more than a couple quarts of honey, because a lot of times the farmer wants the pollination. Now on pollinating, I charge either by the bloom, or if it's a good location and you don't have much pesticide in that area, you might cut your price about 20% for a year-round yard. But any of your yards, you want to make sure that there's one entrance in and someone's there to watch them, because they will load your stuff up.
Okay, I was just looking for something that I could just take some splits to,
Yeah. Well, a split in an out yard, you have to be close enough to where you can maintain it. Because, you know, a split, they have to fly out and mate. And you might have a yard that has 15, 20 swarms hanging in trees where they didn't go back to the box.
Oh, okay, right, fair enough. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, no one's got their hand up. And no one's got questions tonight?
Oh, that ain't that technical now, folks.
You know, Don, you were talking about mating and open mating.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I noticed here is location on those mating nukes. I'm up on a hill, and I've got a yard runs out toward a barn. And at times it can get pretty windy up here. And I've noticed I've actually walked out through the field the winds come from and found little balls of queens in the grass with
Right.
bees on them. And I think it's because they fly out and they get tired flying back against that wind, and they just land there in the grass with the ball of bees that's with them. And I've found that if I pick a better location where the wind doesn't hit quite so hard, I'm not having that much trouble with getting the queens back. It improves their return.
Right.
Also large landmarks. Like if I've got a chicken lot out back in a building, a chicken house, and I seem to have better returns to my open mating to boxes that I put around that building rather than boxes I put out in the field. I think the larger landmarks are easier for them to recognize on their flights back in.
What about color? You running all one color, or are you running various colors?
My boxes are all white, but I actually paint little designs, or I'll get UV resistant bumper stickers and stick on the front of them,
Right.
or something that they can recognize as being different from the other box beside them.
I used to run a lot of the one color, and I found multicolor, I get a better return. And I run mostly single mating nukes, where in South Georgia I ran what they consider a double. And on a mini nuke, on a double, if you got too big of swarm that comes back, or the queen when she's mating brings back too many bees, and if you pull the queen out of the one side and the other one wasn't quite ready and you left her in there, they migrate around and end up killing that other queen because too many bees can't get in the nuke. So that's why I went to the singles.
Yeah, and you know, here I tried those real tiny mini nukes
Right.
that have the frames that are, I don't know, they're maybe 4 inches by 5 inches. They're not even a half medium frame. And in our climate, the northern area, those don't do well here. I can get a couple matings out of them in the early spring, and then they start failing. I have a lot better luck with a 3 or a 5 frame half-size medium frames,
Right.
which
Right.
would be what you would call your mini nuke. But they
That
have
is not
even a
mini.
small. Yeah, they make even a smaller mini that's styrofoam, and I tried
Yeah,
a bunch of those.
Those don't do
those-
well.
No.
Now, the one advantage of using a 6 1/4 mini frame, which is a standard 19-inch frame that's cut in half, is at the end of the year, if you want to save your frames, you put a bar across either a 5-frame box, an 8-frame box, or even a 10-frame box. And on an 8-frame box, you run 8 across the front, and where on that bar is, you run 8 in the back. That way you can maintain, and then the queen comes up and lays early in the spring. You already got brood in each frame. So there's a lot of little tricks that you can do as a commercial beekeeper to get your boxes set up a lot faster.
Yeah, I have several of those. I'm getting ready to put them on right now because our goldenrod flow's just starting to hit, and I want them to get up in those and clean them up. And a couple of them need some new comb drawed out in them, and get those ready. I'll leave them on all winter to try to keep the wax moths out of them if they put some honey and stuff in them.
Yeah.
And then in the spring, hopefully they'll get them laid up and I can get those out early.
No one got questions? We're touching on a lot of technical stuff tonight, so maybe that's what's scaring a lot of people.
Anthony's got his hand up over there. Go ahead, Anthony.
Good evening.
Good evening.
everyone. I think I saw in one of Joe May's videos. I think Joe has those styrofoam mini nukes. Maybe, I don't know. But that wasn't my question. Did you, Stephen, ever get a chance to try that heating pad thing for the Varroa?
I sent it back. I never even opened the box up because we bought a ProVap, and reading the directions on that thermal mite killer, it's 2 to 2.5 hours per hive. And when you run a 50, 100 hives to a location, I would be 99 before I did one operation, 1 yard. So it might be fine organically to kill the mites if you had 1 or 2, maybe up to 10 hives. You know, just about everything in beekeeping is going to have good points and bad points. So you'll have to judge what you want to do and what your results should be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I saw as soon as I saw it. It's just a major drawback. I don't care if you got 2 hives in your backyard. Who wants to wait 2.5 hours to move it to the next one? I just think that's a big downside on that particular unit.
I think the principle of it probably would work good if you had a double deep without that heating pad and just let the bees do what they normally do. They can bring the temperature of that hive up pretty good and control mites. I noticed the hives that are double deeps, I have a lot less problems than the ones we run with 1 frame or 2 frames of bees in.
Yeah.
Everything has a give and take to it. So you have to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, okay. And just on a side note, I became friends with Darlene. You remember Darlene, right?
Oh, lady, I haven't seen her in a while.
Yeah, I became friends with her and we'd talk on the side. And then she like disappeared for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then she messaged me about 2 weeks ago, and she's been having, her mom's in her 90s, so she's been doing a lot to help mom. She's at mom's usually on the weekend, so she's not really available to be here. She wants to be here, and she said she'll come back as soon as she can. Said to say hi, and for whatever reason, she didn't get into it, but she had 2 hives. You know, she waited forever to get her bees, and
right.
She got the bees, and she said both of them have since left.
Huh.
And the mountain lions are eating her goats. I think she said mountain lion.
Yeah, bobcats probably.
Bobcat. You got bobcats? Well, she's in Alabama, right?
Yeah, we got bobcats here.
Yeah, okay. So they were killing her goats, but
yeah.
That's all. She just told me to say hello. She'll be back when she can. Always liked her. She was always good for a laugh, right?
Yeah.
Okay, carry on.
Okay.
Okay, no one's got their hands up. Jason, you got any more info?
I'm going to have to start passing out questionnaires in little text and test it for everybody. See if they're even sleeping or paying attention.
Yeah.
Well, I saw Al Taylor on here a little while ago. Is he still on here?
Yeah, he's got his hand waving.
Hey, Al. Al has one of my breeder queens. I'm wondering how she's doing.
She's doing great, Jason. We checked her a couple of days ago, and she's really laying pretty proficiently. So we're real pleased.
Great. Great. I'm glad.
No, she's doing real well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A buckfast breeder.
Yeah.
See, Al is one of our commercial students. So if you're thinking about getting into the business, you know, buying up the stock, maintain it, get on here and we'll get you on the web page. That's all you take. You know, that's free advertisement. You can't beat it.
I'll say, Don, too, on that I did create a web page, and I'd say well over half of my sales have come off of my web page, and it's been really good. We actually sold more this year than we thought we would. So
yeah, I think Mary's on here. She's one of my students. She's up in Tennessee too, and I think she's holding back selling because yeah, I see her hand up. She's staying busy up there too.
I do have a question also for you.
Okay.
Right at the moment, again, because the breeder, she's really starting to lay. How late can you graft and still have viable queens to sell for this fall?
Well, that's a kind of a tricky question. Basically, if you're good at grafting, you can graft 100 queens right now. You can graft them in December. Now, the second part of that is if you don't have drones, they ain't gonna do you no good.
Right.
I mean, if you can graft, they'll hatch, but you're not gonna get no mating unless you do AI. And unless you're in bees for, I would say, selling bees and going into it, I would be at least 5 years into it before I consider doing AI personally. I mean, you can do, I've seen 2 or 3 of my students that's jumping into it with just a couple of years of, you got to get a bunch of, well, like an old car, you got to get banged up a little bit. You got to take a few bruises. You got to take a few lumps before you're going to move on to that point. It just don't happen overnight, and it's not cheap, the instruments and stuff. Joe Latshaw tried to get me into it probably 10 or 15 years ago. It's not my field. I can do better with the way I'm doing. It's just like you have to figure out what you want to do. If you want to do selling of bees, sell queens, nukes, and bees. Don't start making soap on the side, and don't get into the big honey business because one conflicts with the other. There's not enough time in a day to do nukes, queens, and packages. You got to focus, do one thing and do it well.
Okay, Joe's got his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Got your mic off, Joe. There you go.
There you go.
I've been, the last 2 weeks, I've really had a real good return on my queens being back mated. It's been better than it has been all summer. So I think you'd still be all right where you're at there in Tennessee. Hey, try it. You ain't got nothing to lose.
You got to, if you're standing on that bridge and you're thinking about jumping, you're going to think about it for a long time. You want to make bees, get into it. You're going to make mistakes. I've made more mistakes than anybody around. You got to learn from your mistakes. We have another one of my students just jumped in. Jim Austin is out in Texas now. He's bought bees and selling a lot of bees. So he can tell you, you got bees, you can sell them.
Hey, I got a question for James.
All right.
Hey, James, you haul a lot of nukes back and forth. You have any trouble with the wax breaking on the wooden wax when you haul them?
I don't think he's got his mic on.
Okay.
That's one reason on all of our outyards, Stephen has gone to the plastic, which I personally still like wood and wax. If you can get 2 to 3 good cycles of brood, your frames is not going to break down. But when you're turning nukes and queens as fast as what you're going to do, making a living at it, you're lucky to get the second cycle of brooding there. So the cocoons is what reinforces it. And if you put a starter strip in there and you get a lot of honey coming in, you got a 2-inch band of honey there at 80 degrees and you hit a bump in the road, you got a lot of brood that's on the bottom of that box. So something to think about if you're going to transport bees.
Hey, next up is Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis.
I don't know about, you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yep.
All right. I don't know about your area. My bees are propolized in the front before I can get the doors closed in on them, and the drones are gone. They act like it's about wintertime. So there's no more queen building here.
Well, I noticed that there's
North
starting
Central
to get a
Missouri.
little extra propolis here too, and I've gone through a few of the hives, and in fact, I sold some queens tonight. And the fella asked me if I was going to do any more. I said, I didn't see enough drones. On each frame, I'm not seeing more than about maybe 5-10 drones at the most per frame, and that's nothing to be, making queens. So,
Well, these here, I didn't have 2 showers since winter. It turned August weather in May, and it's now just cooling off. So it's been a bad year all the way around.
Yeah.
So I just made more bees than I did honey.
Right.
But I'm closing them up, feeding them heavy. Just figured, well, they know more than I do. So, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm curious, what state's Dennis in?
Let me unmute him here. Go ahead.
I'm in North Central Missouri.
Okay. Thanks.
The goldenrod is coming on right now, and usually you got about 6 weeks, give or take. but I'm not taking a chance.
Okay.
Nobody else got any questions, eh? Now, if anybody, I know a lot of you get out there, if you deal with anybody that's got a wood miser is looking to sell it, let me know. I have a wood miser that I'm going to sell. It's a LT 40 HD. It's running. You can see I put the wood that we sawed a couple days ago. I want to get one that's got a bigger motor and got a seat on it where I'm getting old. I don't have to walk so far, walk back and forth. I want to upgrade, in other words.
Al's got his hand up. Go ahead, Al.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I've got a question for Joe. I noticed on your video, Joe, that in a couple of your hives, you're putting a medium frames in a deep box with the idea of getting them to put in some drone comb. What kind of success are you having with it at this time of year?
Getting it drawed or putting drone comb in it?
Yes.
My bees are still drawing wax really well. I have not had any problem with that. The drone combs hit on the bottom of the frames, hit and miss about 50%. I got in one today, and she had all worker cells laid up and capped, and then get in the next one, they've got all drones. It's about 50-50. Works a little better maybe in the spring.
Okay. You're north of me, so are you still having pretty good success in getting drones?
You know, I haven't seen a terrible lot of drones. They have dropped off, but my return on mated queens the last 2 weeks has been the best it's been all year. So I'm still making queens. They'll tell me when there ain't no drones out there. When they quit coming back mated, I know there ain't no drones.
Okay, thanks.
Well, he might be having somebody close to his area. But see, if you're going to make queens to sell, you got to kind of watch your stock. So if you're going through your boxes, you're not seeing a lot of drones. That's the drones that you should be depending on, the ones that, there's always going to be drones out there, especially in trees and stuff. But those you can't depend on that. If you're running, say 10 grafting boxes out there, you're going to go through several thousand drones an hour with no trouble at all.
Okay, and Dennis has another question for you.
Last question, I promise. And it's not a question. I just want to tell folks, I've ordered queens from you off and on the last couple of years. This last queen took better than 10 days to get here. It must have got mixed up and went by Alaska route. But I want to say this, she's doing well and healthy, and it was all alive when they got here, so no complaints. Yeah. Only 3 days they get here, no problem at all. But some reason or other, it took a 2-week detour. But I was really
from us?
Yeah, I got it from Steven. And I don't know what the deal was, whether or not it may took a wrong route somewhere, but they come in healthy. She immediately went to the lands, got a good brood pattern, so it worked out pretty good.
I have sent bees the same day, priority mail, to Indiana and Illinois, and going over to North Carolina, and North Carolina is shorter. The ones in North Carolina, they took 2 extra days. So it depends on how the mail runs or their routes. They might be going down south, then back up north, or maybe they're riding on the back of a horse. I don't know.
Well, she's doing real good, so I'm glad. All right, thank you.
Okay, it's back to you, Don.
Okay. I see Matt's here, and I'm surprised Matt ain't talking tonight. He usually tells us what he's having for dinner. All right. Next month, or the next chat we have, it'd be a good idea to write down things that you need to know about hives or questions that you want to ask, because, it's hard for me to kind of read your mind. We was hoping to have a good discussion tonight on AI and at least get you an idea of which way to go. I have bought different bees from different people and had different results. People say the Caucasians they gum things up too bad, but I buy some Caucasians about every 2 to 3 years. I don't buy a lot. I try to upgrade my stock all the time. And I will be probably springtime, I'll be upgrading a whole lot more with some adjacent stuff, because I want to try to get a little bit better lines The ones that I got now, I'm not really complaining about. I wish they was doing better than what they are. They're doing fair, but I would like to try to get away from doing so much the treating and that. If Jason's got some stuff that's supposed to be less treating on it, I'm going to try it and see how it's going to work. And hopefully by the next chat, I could get into the hive and do some videos on the laying patterns of the queen that he has sent me, so we can see, you know, on that.
How often are you treating right now, Don?
Right now, I'm trying to do at least 2 a month, and next month we're going to try to hit at least 3. I'm going to do personally 6, maybe 9 treatments before our cold weather gets in here, because I've learned that if you don't get rid of mites and treat them really good in November, going them to winter, if you got mites, your hive's going to crash a whole lot quicker. And some article I was reading, I don't know if it's got much truth to it. The bees have got fat buildup on them in the summertime, and as later on in the fall, the fat becomes thinner and the mites can penetrate more and do some more damage to it. So, you know, it's high-tech stuff that I read, and I'm not, you know, I got to go by what I see. I'm a nuts and bolts type person. I got to see it, feel it, look at it. You know, I read stuff, and, you know, it's just, to me, it's hearsay until I see it.
Right. And Ricky's got his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've heard that with an AI queen, you've got to stop her from leaving the hive because she doesn't know she's been mated. What's your take on it? I heard Joe's take on it. So.
Well, I'll let Jason ask that because I've never personally run AI queens. This will be the first that I've ran.
Am I unmuted? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true when you first put them in, that you have to introduce an AI queen a special way. Now, most of the ones that I make, I try to get them laying before I even put them up for sale and send them out, because that is the major hurdle. Once that queen's laying, she won't try to fly back out of the hive. So when I introduce my AI queens, I introduce them into a weak nuke with maybe 2-3 frames of nurse bees, and I'll introduce her under a push-in cage so that she has an opportunity to actually start laying before the bees can even get to her. Now, they don't always. I'll usually leave them under there about 3 days before I go ahead and pull the cage off, and they haven't always started by then. But I also put a piece of queen excluder over the entrance so that they can't fly out and try to get mated. They really don't know. And I also clip a wing on my AI queens because I don't want them to accidentally get full if I'm out of town or something and swarm on me. I mean, you don't want to lose a $250 and up, dollar queen. But once that queen starts laying, her urge to fly out is going.
Looks like his audio
Yeah, I
is.
think we lost you there.
Who'd you lose, me or?
Yeah, we just.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard?
Clip queens.
Yeah, you're,
Yeah.
Yeah, the clip.
Basically, what I was getting to is once that queen starts laying, you don't have to worry about it anymore. You can pull the queen excluders off, and she's fine.
Okay, that's
All
cool.
right, I'll tell you how I put mine in. Now, I probably have a lot more experience than a lot of people. I didn't really ask Jason how he did it, but what I done is I went around to about 4 different hives and I pulled a couple frames of brood out of each hive. And I set them in an 8-frame box. I put a queen excluder over the box. Then I put the second box on and I took 2 frames of sealed honey and a frame of partial drawed, what had a little brooding at different stages. And I laid the cage that had the AI queen in. I laid it between the frames, and there was 3 frames missing out of the box on the second box. And I didn't feed him or nothing. I just had the honey in there, and I laid the cage in there sideways. I closed it up. I went back 3 days later, and I just opened the lid up gently. I didn't use no smoke. I reached in, and the queen was out. and I just pulled the cage out and put the lid right back on. And I went back, I guess it was a few days later, and I pulled the frame up. I seen she was walking on it, and I didn't go through the hive, and I didn't pull the queen excluder yet. She was walking around, and I was planning on today, but it was raining. Where I got the queen excluder, what I was hoping is to kill two birds with one stone, and people that raise queens might understand what I've done. I put brood at the bottom with a queen excluder over it and a queen above it. So the natural thing is, I'm hoping the lower section where the queen couldn't get to it, I might have 2 or 3 frames with natural draw queen cell, but might not. But that's how I installed that queen, and so far, if she's good, if she's alive, once they're that many days in there, they're pretty much going to stay. But if you buy an AI queen, I would ask Jason how to put them in. Some people like to put the number 8 hardware cloth, make a 6-inch piece, and just push it over a section with that AI queen in it. That's different ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, once she's laying, then she's not going to try to leave. And I always try to get them laying, even though I've been advised that if I put them in a nuc and get them laying before I sell them, I should charge a lot more for them. I probably didn't make some people happy by doing that, but that's just the way I want to do it. I want to see them laying before I let them go.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Don, doesn't look like anyone's got any further questions.
Nobody else want to talk, eh? All right, I appreciate everybody showing up, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. And thank you, Jason, for coming in and enlightening us about AI queens.
You're welcome.
His webpage is New River Queens.
New River Honeybees.
New River Honeybees.
Yeah.
And get in touch with him. All right, thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Don.
Okay.